My name is Scott Goldstein, Executive Director of EmpowerEd. Today I'm addressing the topic before the DC Council on learning loss. The very concept of learning loss and how we measure it is loaded with assumptions. Students have experienced this past year in such a variety of ways: how they're learning, in what type of learning environment, with what type of family supports, and with what foundation to build upon. For many of our students, this year has represented an opportunity to learn new skills in digital literacy they might never have had the time to focus on. For many, it has represented a year of lost opportunity, in which the ones they feel most acutely are the loss of social interaction and experiential and joyful learning. And yes, for some students, a loss of crucial time to learn academic content. Because of this varied experience, I'm troubled by today's expert panel that consists mostly of academic and research experts. With all due respect, the panel that comes first should consist primarily of students, teachers, and parents. They are the ones who can accurately diagnose what has been lost and gained in this year. I want to commend Councilmember Christina Henderson for reaching out to students and teachers for their own reactions before this hearing. That conversation is a prerequisite to this expert panel, because if we assume what students have lost is math and reading progress alone, or even that those are the most important losses, we will head down a predictable path that will fail our students. When we use terms like high dosage tutoring to prescribe doubling down on math or reading instruction alone, at a time when students may have most acutely felt the loss of physical education, the arts, social skill building, the social studies, and science content that research tells us is the foundation for being able to read for understanding well and become responsible citizens. Moreover, if we're concerned about the loss of instructional time, the absolute last thing we should be doing is taking students out of class for an extended stretch this spring to administer the PARCC test. I've heard some say that it's essential to administer these tests to have a measurement of learning loss and how different populations have fared differently in virtual learning. First, no measurement through PARCC can accurately reflect student learning, both because of how it will be administered and because of the vastly different circumstances under which children have learned and in which they will take the test this year. EmpowerEd recently conducted a poll of charter school principals and found that 95% of principals surveyed disagreed with the statement this year's PARCC testing will be able to provide an accurate picture of student learning or learning loss over the past year. 95% of principals. We know why this assessment won't be accurate. First, it will be administered in a way that ensures far less process integrity than normal testing. Even in normal times, the test is highly biased, and it's important to note has been dropped by nearly every single jurisdiction that originally adopted it. Second, there is no reason to collect data from a test unless we can use it. But we know that whatever the data shows, there will be no way to understand what it should prescribe, because we will not be able to crosswalk student losses or gains with the reasons for those losses or gains. For example, we won't know if 50% of students at a particular school gained because their particular school offered a variety of supports that another school did not this year, or that some students gained at schools where most declined because they participated in a learning pod offered by a nonprofit organization in their neighborhood. We won't know what percentage of students who declined don't have a private room at their house to do online learning from, or a reliable internet connection to connect to virtual learning with. Since we can't cross-reference the results with that data, what precisely will we learn? But PARCC is in particular precisely the wrong test for this year. PARCC is not an adaptive test, meaning it will not adjust as students take the test to provide an accurate measure of where a student has learned to, and does not provide data useful for determining which particular skills a student may be behind in and what kind of instruction will bridge that gap. Instead, it gives us little granular data, but a summative score that will indicate where a student generally is in reading or math, just enough to meet the goals of those advocating for the test, to have data that proves we need high dosage tutoring to make up for losses. And there are those who stand to gain from that assumption, but they may not be our students. In a typical year during my time teaching high school in DC, more than a month, sometimes two, of classroom instruction was interrupted to administer the PARCC test. I've heard some express they don't understand why testing could lead to further learning loss. The reason they don't understand this is because the council often believes expert panels on education will be more informative than panels of students, teachers, and families. But if you spend 5 minutes with any group of DC teachers, they'll tell you how much instructional time they lose each year to testing. So let me say as clearly as possible, at a time when there is so much concern about learning loss, administering PARCC will do more to exacerbate learning loss than to measure it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't assess student learning. If we want to address the losses this year, we should focus on teacher-administered formative and summative assessments, teacher and school level benchmarks, and most of all, well-proven strategies to equalize learning opportunities. We should be funding outdoor learning now to get far more students this spring and summer back to safe and more effective in-person learning. We should be closing bars and restaurants to indoor dining to control community spread so more parents and students actually feel comfortable going back to our buildings and to avoid the fits and starts that we've seen in reopening. Instead, we seem focused backwards on adopting narratives not based in the realities of students, teachers, and families in order to prop up a prescription that may be just as unequal as the challenges we say we're addressing. This year has been a huge loss for many, but beyond the pandemic itself, the reason why students and families have lost so much is the failure of our system to invest more heavily in what we already knew would equalize outcomes. Solutions we don't need a test result to tell us. Internet access for all, access to safe outdoor space and learning, affordable housing, family equity payments to families to tackle the inequities that have been created by pods. It's never too late to listen. Those most affected by the inequities of this year have plenty to say about how to address them. Thank you.